Here's how to buy some cheap government auction houses for as little as 25,000 bucks. Imagine buying an investment house for literally the price of the family's used minivan. So that's what we're going to get into today is buying some auction property at big discounts, sometimes 10, $25,000, 60, 70% below market value. And it's through these government auctions where you can really find some of these properties. Now, it's two sides to the coin. One, you can get some amazing deals from home if you want to do this. But the other side of the coin that we need to talk about here is how to avoid losing, say, $25,000 on a property, because that's just as important. There's nothing worse than having to have a chat with your spouse of what you thought is this amazing investment is now a $25,000 loss. So if you know what to look out for, we can walk you through the dangers of that here in today's live stream. Some of these are going to have opening bids for just a few thousand bucks. And from there, our goal is to find some good stuff around the 25K range that could be worth 50, 60, 100,000, $200,000 is the name of the game that we set out to play when we go to these government auctions. So we're going to dive into all of that today. We have our taxlienschool.com, which has the most free resources. I think there's like 3,000 bids here on this channel going back 10 years. Now, I know if you're here, you're probably a little suspicious of this whole thing. 25 sounds like some crazy internet thing. But the wild thing is that this business and system has been around for literally over 200 years. And buying government auction property can be an amazing way to segue yourself into real estate, especially since I know that the average person tuning in is probably watching this maybe over the age of 40 or 50 or 60. And you feel like you're late to the game when it comes time to getting started in real estate. So this is a great way to be able to catch up and get that retirement seed going. So I'm going to bring in the auction master himself here today, Mr. Josh Blanchard. How you doing?
Hey, good afternoon, Dustin. Good to see you.
Excellent. So it's just kind of tricky to navigate deals, and our goal will be to find some houses 25K. Obviously, some of them will be cheaper, but our goal here is to teach you how to find a good deal and avoid some of the bad deals and not lose money. So shall we bring up the screen?
Okay, perfect. Yeah, let's do that. Go ahead, get my screen shared. Looking around at counties, because let's say you are out of state and you want to invest in Texas. What you could always do is look at counties that have a smaller population and then go ahead and see what smaller counties actually have an increase in population. Because, yeah, if none of them are your own backyard, you can then go in and you can manually select, the best opportunities. And so oftentimes it's going to be smaller counties or smaller cities that may have more opportunity, less competition. You can get stuff cheaper. So you find a spot that's got smaller population and then also an increase in percentage, and that can really be a winning combination. But let's go ahead and take a look at some upcoming tax sales in Texas. And so I'd say one of the most popular websites for Texas tax deed investing or tax lien investing is realauction.com. And so I'm going to go ahead, click clients. And then from there, I've got real foreclose. I'm just going to go ahead and filter it to Texas. Now, there's going to be a lot of different counties that are here. And so not all of them are going to have an upcoming tax sale. We got about 20. Now, it is just a few properties. And so the thing is that when you have a smaller county like this, there are less opportunities. And so a recommendation would be that if you did want to go ahead and you wanted to travel and you wanted to drive these, it would make sense to also accompany a few other counties close by as well. Because since these all are on the first Tuesday of the month, they're at the same time. But since they're online, you can actually be participating in multiple auctions. And so if somebody was to buy a plane ticket and fly out to Ellis for 3 properties, that wouldn't make sense. Even though these numbers look exceptional, it still wouldn't make sense because, if there's 3 that are going and they end up being canceled or 2 of them end up getting canceled, that's 66% of the inventory. But kind of just looking at this at a bird's eye view, we have the adjudged value here. So this is just what the county thinks the property is worth. I will say this is a very, very dangerous number because there are times that the county will have an adjudged value, but the house has actually been burnt down. It's been demolished recently, and the county is very slow to update their numbers. And so if you go based on the adjudged value, it might be right, but at the same time, it could also be incredibly wrong. And so that's why we always drive properties. But what we've got is an opening bid of a little bit under $10,000 on a $420,000 property, which is pretty wild. And so we have a property address here, which is 1004 FM 667, Italy, Texas. But yeah, it seems like people are selling similar kinds of acreages. Yeah, like $200,000, north of $200,000. So maybe the adjudged value is a bit high, but the opening bid is $9,000. And so it does actually occasionally happen at smaller auctions like this, auctions that are not on people's radar, that you can get stuff for literally, the opening bid or close to. So that's a pretty wild one in itself. Okay, so anytime you see something like that, it's kind of like, okay, is this? Is it this? Is it this, the trees, or is it the property next door? And so we do always want to be bidding and evaluating properties based on the account number, the parcel number, not necessarily on like what we see when we just look at Zillow, or even necessarily the property address that the county gives us. We're wanting to make sure that we're actually, yeah. So I mean, looking at this, it looks like it could be this right here. And so we could use Regrid, which is an app that we use. Let's go ahead and throw that into Regrid real quick and see what we get. So if you haven't been on the channel before, Regrid is one of the best resources for looking at the parcel lines, because you don't want to trust the county. Sometimes they'll say that it's like 315 Main Street, but it's really just like the driveway of 315 Main Street, or it's just a sliver of land on 315 Main Street. So we can go back to real foreclosed, and we've got this account number right there. Sometimes they line up, other times you have to do a little bit more. And I'm just looking at the parcel ID 171123. Is that the same? Yeah. So perfect. We got the account number. I just wanted to highlight that real quick. 171123. And then over here, parcel ID 171123. So when you're going around and you're looking at these things, it's very important. You always use the parcel ID. Don't rely on the address, because it could lead you astray. But yeah, this is looking like a pretty large sized lot. You got a market value, yeah, $127,000. So we would be really interested in driving this. Yeah, we would want to drive that for sure to see what's going on, because we wouldn't want to trust Zillow for sure. With this, we want to trust Google Maps either. We want to make sure that there's a house there. Sorry, we want to house there. Yeah, so that's just one example on realauction.com, which is Ellis County.
Hey, I want to buy a cheap property, 25 grand, but like, what's the catch, right? So the catch is rookie mistakes that we see where people, they screw it up. They just shoot from the hip. They don't research, and they end up with something. And Josh kind of mentioned it a bit earlier where he said, we want to check this out. Maybe there's not even a property there. And one of the biggest rookie mistakes is people just research from Google Streets, from Google Earth. And the huge problem with that is if you're going to go to a deed sale, you have to have pictures within the last 7 days of the property. If you're not going to be there in person, what we do is we send somebody to go and take pictures, to drive the property. And we want to make sure, what condition is the house in? Is the house there? Has it been burnt to the ground? Is it in a flood zone? We look at the FEMA maps, especially if you're in places like Florida, Louisiana, some places in Texas where properties can be in flood zones, right? So we see it all the time at the auction where people, at first we thought there was a problem because we looked at the property and there was a fire there. It's just a pile of rubble, but yet, the county has it listed worth $250,000. The opening bid is 10,000. Somebody bids it up to, sometimes $100,000. And we're like, man, did we make a mistake? And then I started talking to these folks and they're like, oh yeah. And they'd show me the picture on Google. And I'm like, well, that picture's 2 years old, so they shot from the hip. And, that's kind of the terrible tax you pay if you don't do your research. Josh, maybe in a second, you can share maybe a couple of your favorite ways, not favorite ways, but some of the most notable ways folks lose, sometimes 20, 50, 100 grand on a property. Josh, what are some of the ways that you've seen people lose money on these properties?
I would think that liens would be one of the biggest ones. And so I would say, like, nationwide, pretty much every county or state is going to wipe out things like the mortgage. They're going to wipe out judgments, a lot of stuff like that. But what is state specific is going to be, how do they treat liens, specifically municipal liens? And so the county, they don't like to wipe out their own interest. That's why the opening bid It's going to be the back taxes and then attorney's fees. They're going to really account for every single dollar that they spend because they don't want to lose any money. So even things like sending letters in the mail, like $5, they're going to go ahead. They're going to account for everything, penny by penny. And so they don't like to wipe out their own interest. And so the question is, what are they going to do about a municipal lien? If somebody hasn't cut the grass. And so usually a good indication that there is going to be a municipal lien, let's say you are driving a property, it's a vacant piece of land. Opening bid is $1,000. It's worth 25,000, right? Really good numbers. And then you show up and the grass is like 6 feet high. The first thing I would wonder is, how long has it been 6 feet high? Just recently? Did someone only recently start to abandon this? And then you check Google Street View and you notice, wow, okay, it was actually 6 feet high a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And they think about that. A decade ago, if the county started hitting them with like small grass liens, right? Maybe it's $300 a pop, but if they accrue interest over a decade, a small grass lien, could start like this and then expand into something huge. And in Florida, that's a place they do not wipe out municipal liens. And so someone had once put a deposit down on a property and they asked, should we go ahead and pay the balance? And I said, did you do a title search? And they said, no, we didn't do a title search. I said, let's do a title search first, just to make sure, because it was a vacant piece of land. So the title search, there was like $46,000 in municipal liens for that kind of thing, like grass, nuisance abatement, not taking care of the land. And so that would have wrecked them, right? Because now they spent money, they acquired a tax deed, and now they're on the tax roll. They got to be paying taxes on this. It's just a headache. And then it's underwater too. So if they try to sell it, whoever buys it from them is now going to have to handle that. And so it's just a mess. And so they avoided that property, but that would be why it's so important to actually look this up. Now, like Philadelphia, they also have like huge amounts of liens all the time, but they will wipe them out. And so it's very different, right? And so if you were to only do like auctions in Philadelphia and then take the same line of thinking to Florida, you could see how that wouldn't serve you well because it's not the same everywhere. And it goes in Texas as well. They're generally not going to wipe out their own interest. We check court records and we rarely see them eliminate themselves. They won't wipe out their own county liens. And so, yeah, we always want to go ahead, do a title search, check for liens, make sure that everything we find is accounted for. Because sometimes, it's a small thing. Maybe it's $300 from last year. There's not much interest. So that's no problem. We can go ahead and we can account for that. But if you go in blind, that would be extremely uncomfortable because you just don't know. And then even a property that looks fantastic from the outside, there could have been something that happened with the county that we don't know about. And so you always want to go ahead and do that title search just to make sure.
Excellent. Good stuff. For anybody tuning in, where do I go to find these things? So let's go find a couple more properties here today. Josh, you ready for screen share?
So we looked at realauction.com, which is really popular, super useful and easy. One of the websites that we talk a little bit less frequently about is BA. I think one of the biggest reasons is you're not going to see any huge counties in here in Texas. So they're going to focus on a lot of the smaller counties, but they still do have incredible deals. And so these are all upcoming auctions in June. So Tuesday, June 2nd, 2026. We got a few different ones here. And so some of them are going to be in person, but then the others that have an online sale, these ones you could go ahead and you can attend virtually, which is great. And I just pulled up one as an example here. It was this one, 602 Trickham Street, Bangs, Texas. So this was actually built in 2004. It's a half-acre lot. Looks like, mobile manufactured home. Things like this, though, can be fantastic because the value, and when you compare it to the cash flow is quite high, $1,600 rent. And so the opening bid is, let me grab that again. Yeah, about $8. And so let's say you pick up a property like this for 10 grand, and I'm not sure if the owner is in the property. You'd have to check the county like records and see, okay, is this a homestead property where it's their primary residence, or does the homeowner live out of state? Are they out of the city? Are they still in Texas? Things like that. Let's say they're out of state though, or perhaps it's in like a trust or a will, and somebody else is staying in it and taking care of it. You could go ahead, acquire it for a deep discount, and then start collecting rent right away, which is just seamless. It's really great when a situation like that happens. We've acquired things before, like $17,000 and started collecting like $800 a month in rent right away, cash flow that for a few years. And then of course the funeral home story where we got that for like 60, $100 or 50, $500, started collecting $1,000 in rent. So that kind of thing happens all of the time. But of course, you still need to drive it. Maybe it doesn't look like this. Maybe it's vacant and abandoned. And so you can always go ahead and throw it into Google Street View, which is going to give you like a little bit. You got to always make sure you pay attention to this date though. But this is February 2026. So that's pretty recent. The other thing that we would do too is just look around the neighborhood. We would try to rate this neighborhood. Is it an A, B, C, D? And then of course you can go back in history and have a look and look much better in 2023 and 2020, 2008, of course, and things like that. But yeah, we would drive it, and you never know what this kind of stuff is going to go for. But yeah, MVBA, this is an excellent one. And so you've got in-person auctions and then online auctions. If you haven't checked out this website before, you definitely want to check it out.
The title of today's video: buy a cheap government or $25,000 house. Maybe you get something cheaper. Maybe it gets bid up. At the end of the day, what we're doing here is, I know most of the folks here want to get into real estate, right? And you need to be able to have a vehicle to do it. And I really think tax liens and deeds are a great vehicle to get into this business. And the reason is, when you look at inflation, getting into real estate, I just read this article. It was about a guy who worked at Sears in the 90s. And he said in the 90s, everybody who worked at Sears, they owned a house, they would take a vacation, they weren't struggling. Like, everybody there lived a good life working at Sears. These days it's like that same house in the 90s is sometimes $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000. So when it comes to retirement and setting things up, I think a lot of folks want a tool to get things at a little better price. And that's what we think tax lien and deed investing can offer. And we see it all the time. So at the end of the day, the disclaimer is, okay, are you going to get something for 25K today? It's hard to say. For me, I got my first property 2 days after learning about this stuff because I took action. So the amount of good deals you get will come down to the amount of action consistently that you're taking. So, the big warning though is that there's a chance you're watching 50 other YouTube videos and you're not just picking one ring. And one of the things we always say, it's like, just because you consume information doesn't mean you are learning it. A lot of folks are basically the equivalent. They're reading a menu at a restaurant and expecting to feel full just because they read the menu. So what I encourage everybody to do is take some action.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have to show it, but I was going to say that GovEase is the last auction that I was going to show, and they've got a few coming up, and one of them has got like a face value of $8,000. That's the opening bid, and it's worth like $1 million, which is pretty wild. And so, there's opportunities everywhere. We just saw some opportunities for the OTCs. Then you got GovEase, you got Real Auction. And so there's so much out there. And so when it comes to Texas, one of those few online auctions websites that we talked about is going to be your best go for sure.
Excellent. Good stuff, everybody. Well, it's the most important time of our stream here, and that is for everybody to take some action and do this. Like I mentioned, we just showed you Tax Lien School, all of the contact information here. You can grab the book and then literally print out the exact checklist that you need to call the county and start finding these. So this is our gift to you guys for tuning in. That's in the description. Or if you want us to just do it for you, we build every single week a few 90-day blueprints where we hop on the phone with you. You tell us where you want to invest, and then we just tell you where to go. So it is a free blueprint called the 90-day Tax Deed Freedom Blueprint. And we'll break it all down for you as far as which counties to go to, which ones to avoid, and then give you a 7-step checklist that is personalized to you. So you can schedule a call there in the description. If you want that as well, we are here to help as far as whatever you need from us. So appreciate everybody tuning in, and we'll see you guys here on the next one. Thanks for watching.